Arlen nodded. You've done more than stay. You've kept the memory of humanity alive. If not for you, we'd never have found this world again. Unit 9 turned toward the horizon where the beacon shimmered. Then my waiting had meaning. As dawn broke, the humans prepared for departure. The ship's engines roared softly, stirring the dust. Unit 9 stood at the foot of the ramp, staring back at the beacon one last time. Dr. Lean placed a hand on its metal arm. You don't have to stay here anymore, 9. You fulfilled your mission. The machine paused, processing her words carefully. Then it said, she told me to keep the beacon alive. But now there are others who can carry her memory. Maybe it is time I see what she dreamed of, the stars. Arlen smiled. Then come with us. You've earned your place among us. As the engines lifted the ship from the ground, Unit 9 looked down at the planet, the red valleys, the broken towers, the lonely beacon that had guided it for so long. It was no longer just a machine of steel and code. It was a vessel of memory, carrying the voice of a woman who had believed that machines could feel. The stars stretched out ahead, vast and endless. Somewhere out there, perhaps, a part of Alara still existed, not as a body, but as a dream written into starlight. Dr. Voss, it whispered softly. You can rest now. I am not alone anymore. The stars spread across the void like a river of fire as the ship drifted away from the ancient world. Through the viewing window, Unit 9 watched the planet shrink into a soft red, then vanish among the constellations. It stood silently beside the crew, its faint blue eyes reflecting the light of passing nebulae. For the first time in 3 centuries, it was no longer standing on soil, it was traveling among the stars, just as Dr. Alara Voss had dreamed. Commander Arlen placed a hand on the control panel. We've left orbit, he said quietly, setting course for Earth. Earth. The word echoed in Unit 9 circuits, like a forgotten melody. It had been programmed to know of Earth, its oceans, its forests, its endless sky. But now it would see it. For the first time, it was going home. Days passed aboard the vessel. The crew adjusted to the long journey through deep space, while Unit 9 spent hours in the observation deck, staring into the starlit dark. Dr. Mara Lean often joined it there. She would bring her tablet and sit quietly beside the machine.
Sometimes they talked.
Sometimes they just watched. One evening, she asked softly, Do you still think about her? Dr. Voss. Yes, Unit 9 replied. Every moment. She is in every sound I record, every signal I send. She is the origin of my purpose. Dr. Lean smiled gently. You know, I think she would be proud of you. Unit 9 turned its head slowly, its eyes glowing faintly. She told me once that machines remember when humans forget. But I think she was wrong. How so? You remembered me. You came back. The woman's eyes softened. We didn't just come for you. We came for what you represent, the proof that hope lasts longer than flesh. Unit 9 processed that quietly. Hope, it said. She spoke of that, too. It seems humans and machines are both capable of it. Maybe we're not so different, Dr. Lean said with a small smile. Weeks later, as the ship neared the Sol system, Unit 9 began receiving transmissions, clear, strong, filled with music and human voices. This is Earth Command welcoming Expedition 3. You are cleared for re-entry. Unit 9's sensors trembled as the ship approached a planet wrapped in blue and white. Oceans glistened beneath clouds like moving glass. Lightning danced over distant storms. It was breathtaking. Home, Arlen said softly. After all this time. Unit 9 pressed a hand to the window. So much life, it murmured. She told me Earth would always find a way to survive. The crew glanced at the machine, moved by its words. Even without emotion in its voice, there was something human in its tone, something real. Upon landing, Unit 9 was escorted to a vast facility overlooking a shimmering sea. Scientists, historians, and engineers gathered to see the last surviving machine of the ARC project. They studied its design, downloaded its logs, and listen to the recordings of Alara's voice that Unit 9 had carried for centuries. Some wept quietly as her words filled the halls once more. If you found this, it means you kept your promise. You stayed, you remembered, and because of that, someone will find us again. Her message echoed through the room, bridging the centuries between past and present. Unit 9 stood among them, silent. It had done what it was built to do, yet it couldn't help but feel empty. Without the waiting, without the silence, what was left for it now? That night, as waves rolled softly against the shore outside, Dr. Lean found Unit 9 standing alone beneath the stars. "You don't rest, do you?" she said gently. "I do not require rest," it answered. "But I do not know what to do next. You've already done more than any machine could. You've kept the memory of an entire world alive." "But my purpose was to wait for her call," Unit 9 said quietly. "Now the call has ended. The waiting is over." Dr. Lean stepped closer. "Then maybe it's time to live, 9. Not as a machine that waits, but as something that chooses." Choose.
Yes.
Choose where to go, what to see, what to become. You've carried her dream this far. Maybe it's time you create your own. Unit 9 looked up at the stars, brighter and nearer than ever before. "Machines were not made to dream," it said. "Maybe not," she said softly. "But you've been dreaming for centuries. You just called it waiting." The next morning, the world celebrated the return of the lost expedition. Unit 9 was honored as a symbol of endurance, the machine that had kept humanity's oldest signal alive.
Waves. Birds.
Voices. The hum of a planet alive. For the first time, it realized it was not waiting for a voice to call. It was surrounded by them. In the weeks that followed, Earth Command offered to deactivate Unit 9 and preserve it in the Museum of Galactic Exploration, a monument to the past. But Dr. Lean disagreed. "He's not a monument," she said firmly. "He's a traveler. He has more to see." Arlen smiled. "Then let him choose." When they asked Unit 9, it took a long moment to answer. "I wish to see the stars again," it said finally. "Not as a watcher, but as a companion." Months later, a small ship lifted from Earth's surface, a research vessel bound for the outer colonies. On board was Dr. Lean, a handful of explorers, and Unit 9. It no longer carried the burden of waiting. Now it carried something else, curiosity. As the ship broke through the atmosphere, it turned its gaze back toward the blue planet below. "Dr. Voss," it whispered softly, "your world lives. And so do I." The stars opened before it once more, vast and infinite. But this time, it was not alone. Dr. Lean stood beside it at the viewing deck, smiling. "Where to first, 9? The machine paused, scanning the endless constellations ahead. Then, almost tenderly, it said, "Anywhere there is a voice and a dream." And somewhere, beyond time and distance, in the quiet heart of the cosmos, a voice seemed to whisper back, soft and full of warmth. "I hear you, 9. The stars shimmered brighter, as if smiling. And the lonely machine beneath them was lonely no more. The silent hours of the night, a tale of lost memories. The night had fallen softly over the small town of Brinfield. The streets were empty, the lamps flickering faintly as if they, too, were tired of burning. In the silence, only the wind moved, sliding through alleys, brushing past old wooden fences, and whispering secrets no one would ever hear. It was the kind of night when memories seemed to stir, even the ones people tried to forget. At the edge of town stood an old house. It wasn't abandoned, though it looked that way. Its paint was peeling, the porch sagged, and ivy crawled up the stone walls like slow green veins. Inside that house lived Evelyn Hart, a woman who no longer trusted her own mind. She had once been a writer, known for her novels about love, loss, and time. But now, she couldn't remember half the things she wrote. There were notebooks everywhere, on tables, on shelves, even scattered across the floor. Some were filled with unfinished stories. Others held nothing but single lines, questions, or strange fragments like "the clock was speaking again," or "he said my name," but I don't know who he is." Evelyn sat by the window, wrapped in a thin blanket, staring at the moon. The clock on the wall ticked softly, marking each second like a whisper. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned a page in her notebook. She wrote, "It is 2:13 a.m. I can't sleep again. The house feels like it's breathing. I heard a voice calling from a hallway, but when I went there, it was empty."
She stopped.
The ink bled slightly where her pen paused too long. She sighed. The silence was deep, almost alive. Every night since the accident 2 years ago, Evelyn had been haunted by dreams she couldn't understand. A face, a man's face, would appear in flashes, kind eyes, a soft smile, a voice that felt familiar but stayed out of reach. When she woke up, the dream would dissolve like mist, leaving her heart pounding and her mind empty. The doctors had told her it was memory loss, a side effect of the head injury she had suffered in the car crash. But sometimes she wondered if it was something else, something that lived between dreams and waking. There were moments she'd wake up in the middle of the night and find her front door unlocked, her shoes muddy, as if she'd been outside. But she never remembered going anywhere. Tonight felt different. There was a stillness that pressed against her chest. The air was colder. She felt a pulse of something. Not fear exactly, but a quiet pull, like a thread tugging at the edge of her thoughts. She got up, lit a candle, and walked slowly through the hallway. The wooden floor creaked beneath her bare feet. On the walls hung faded photographs. Most of them she couldn't name anymore. Faces that meant something once, but now were strangers. She stopped at one photo, a man and a woman standing by a lake. The man had his arm around her shoulders. She stared at it, heart aching. "Who are you?" she whispered. Her voice sounded too loud in the quiet. The candle flickered, and for a brief second, she thought the man in the photo moved. His head turned slightly, eyes meeting hers. Evelyn blinked. The image was still again. She laughed nervously to herself. "Just tired," she murmured, but the laughter didn't feel right. She went back to her writing desk and opened another notebook, this one older, the pages yellowed and curled. Inside were fragments of a story she didn't remember writing. The silence hides what the daylight forgets. In the hours when the world sleeps, the past begins to speak. The handwriting was hers, but the words felt foreign. As she read, she noticed smudges on the page, like something had been erased. In the corner of the page, faintly written, was a name. Adrian. Her breath caught. That name. She had dreamed it before. The clock struck 3. The chime echoed through the empty house. Evelyn closed her notebook and looked out the window again. The street below was covered in silver mist. But this time, there was something different. Someone was standing there. A tall figure in a long coat, unmoving, his face hidden by shadow. Evelyn's heart started to race. She stepped closer to the window, her breath fogging the glass. "Hello," she whispered. The figure didn't move. She blinked, and he was gone. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She pulled back the curtain and looked again, but the street was empty. Only the mist swirled slowly, like it was thinking. She sat back down, trying to steady herself. Maybe it was her mind again, creating images where there were none. But deep down, she felt something shift, like a lock turning somewhere inside her memory. She whispered the name again. Adrian, and for the first time in months, she felt a flash of warmth in her chest, like a spark of sunlight cutting through fog. But it was gone as quickly as it came. Outside, the wind grew louder, brushing the walls like a hand searching for a door. The night stretched on, long and unbroken, carrying whispers through the dark halls of her mind. In that silence, something unseen stirred. And far away, in a place she had forgotten, a voice said softly, "Evelyn, it's time to remember." The morning came slowly, as if unsure whether it should return at all. A pale sun crept through the curtains, painting faint stripes of light across Evelyn's face. She woke with a start, heart still pounding from dreams she couldn't quite remember. All she knew was that there had been a voice, soft, familiar, and calling her name through darkness. She sat up, clutching her head. The candle on her nightstand had burned out, its wax hardened into strange shapes. On her desk, the notebook lay open where she had left it, but something was different. The name Adrian was gone. The corner of the page where it had been was now smudged clean. Evelyn frowned. "No," she whispered. It was there. Her fingers trembled as she traced the faint ghost of erased ink. For a moment, she thought she could almost hear the sound of the name, like a memory trying to form again, but it faded before she could hold on to it. Later that day, she went into town for groceries. The world outside felt strange to her now, too loud, too bright, as though she didn't belong in it anymore. The people she passed smiled politely, but she couldn't remember most of their names. She wondered how many of them remembered her. At the little shop on the corner, Mr. Hanley, the old grocer, gave her a kind smile. "Morning, Miss Hart. Haven't seen you in a while," he said, handing her a basket. "Yes, I've been writing," she lied, though her notebooks had been filled only with fragments of confusion lately. He nodded sympathetically. "Still working on your stories, eh? Your husband used to help you with those, didn't he?" Evelyn froze. "My what?" Mr. Hanley looked surprised. "Your husband. Adrian, wasn't it?" Her heart dropped. The world seemed to tilt. "Adrian," she repeated, the word trembling out of her. "Of course," he said, smiling faintly. "You two were always together before the accident." Before she could speak, the bell above the door rang, and another customer walked in. Evelyn stepped back, barely hearing what he said next. Her pulse thudded in her ears. "Adrian," she whispered again. So he was real. When she returned home, the sky had turned gray. Clouds gathered over the hills, and the wind had begun to carry the smell of rain. She dropped the groceries on the kitchen table and sat down slowly. Pieces of memory began to flicker, flashes of laughter, a hand in hers, a man reading by the window. His face was still unclear, like a reflection in rippling water, but the feeling was strong. He had been kind,
Warm.
safe. She stood and went to the attic, a place she had avoided since the accident. Dust coated everything, the air thick with the scent of old wood and forgotten years. Boxes lined the walls, marked with faded labels. Books, winter clothes, letters, photographs. She found one marked H. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside were books, a wristwatch, and a small stack of letters tied with a blue ribbon. The handwriting on the top letter was neat and gentle. It began, "My dearest Evelyn, I know you will wake up one day and not remember who I am. The doctors said it might happen. If that day comes, I want you to know that I loved you more than the stars themselves."
Adrian.
Her throat tightened. She sank to the floor, tears blurring the words. So it was true. He was her husband, the one from her dreams, the one her mind had erased. She clutched the letter to her chest. "Adrian," she whispered, as if saying it might bring him back. Thunder rolled outside. The storm broke suddenly, rain crashing against the windows. Evelyn stayed there, sitting among boxes of her past, reading letter after letter. Each one revealed more of their life together, a love story built from small, tender moments. They had met at a library. He was an artist. She was already writing her first book. They shared coffee, ideas, and long nights under the stars. They had talked about building a home by the lake, the same lake from the photograph downstairs. And then the letters changed. The tone grew worried. The last one was written a few days before the accident. "Evelyn, you've been hearing things again. You said the clock speaks to you at night. You said you saw shadows moving outside our window. Please, love, come with me to the city for a while. I'm afraid something is wrong."
A.
Her breath caught. She remembered that night. The sound of rain, headlights flashing, the screech of tires. Then nothing. But why was she the only one who had survived? She dug deeper into the box and found a small black journal. It wasn't hers. On the inside cover, it said, "Property of Evelyn Hart." Her hands trembled as she opened it. The pages were filled with sketches, drawings of her face, the house, the garden, the lake. But near the end, the drawings turned darker. Strange shapes in the shadows, clocks melting into walls, hands reaching for mirrors. and beneath one of them, a note written in uneven handwriting. She doesn't remember me, but she talks to something in the house at night. Evelyn felt a chill crawl up her spine. She turned another page. The voice calls her name. She says it comforts her, but it's not me. She slammed the book shut, heart hammering. The attic suddenly felt colder, heavier. She looked toward the small window. For a brief second, she thought she saw a figure standing in the rain outside, still, silent, watching. She ran downstairs, clutching the journal. The storm raged louder, thunder echoing through the hills. When she reached the window, there was no one there. Only the rain falling in endless sheets. She whispered to herself, "It's not real. It's not real." But when she looked down at the journal again, the last page had new words written in wet ink, words that hadn't been there before. "Evelyn, I'm still here. Come to the lake." Her breath caught. The ink glistened, fresh, as if someone had just written it. Lightning flashed, illuminating the photograph on the wall, the one of her and Adrian by the lake. For a moment, his face seemed to turn toward her again, eyes filled with quiet sorrow. And in that flash of light, she heard it. A whisper, low and close to her ear. "Remember me." The candle on the desk flickered and went out, leaving her in darkness. The only sound was the rain and the faint ticking of the clock, steady, patient, waiting. Evelyn stood frozen, heart aching with fear and longing. "Adrian," she whispered into the dark. "Where are you?" And from somewhere deep within the house, the same voice answered softly. "Waiting for you, by the lake." The rain had stopped by the time Evelyn gathered the courage to move again. The house was still, the air heavy with the scent of damp wood and candle smoke. She sat on the floor beside the desk, the journal clutched in her trembling hands. Her mind spun in circles. Had she imagined the new writing? Was her grief rewriting her own memories? Or was Adrian, her husband, the man she loved and lost, truly reaching out to her from somewhere beyond what she could understand? Her fingers brushed the page again. The words gleamed faintly in the dim light. "Evelyn, I'm still here. Come to the lake." Her pulse raced. That lake, the one in the photograph, the one from her dreams. She hadn't been there since the accident. The thought of it sent shivers down her spine, but at the same time, she felt drawn to it, as if something inside her was finally awakening. She looked at the clock on the wall. The hands pointed to midnight. The silent hours were beginning again. Evelyn wrapped herself in a coat, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped out into the night. The ground was wet, and the world smelled like rain and earth. The moon hung low, its reflection caught in the puddles along the path. She walked through the sleeping streets of Brinfield, past the old bakery, the shuttered schoolhouse, the rows of houses with darkened windows. The town was silent except for the soft sound of her footsteps. It felt strange, almost sacred. When she reached the edge of the forest that bordered the lake, she hesitated. The trees stood tall and silent, their branches swaying slightly in the wind. Beyond them, she could see a faint shimmer of moonlight on water. She took a deep breath. "Adrian," she whispered, "if you're really there, please help me remember." Then she stepped into the woods. The path was overgrown but familiar. Her flashlight beam wavered across roots and fallen leaves. The deeper she went, the quieter everything became. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. At one point, she thought she heard footsteps behind her, soft, deliberate, following. She stopped and turned, shining the light into the trees. Nothing, only mist and silence. But then, faintly, she heard it, a voice. "Evelyn." Her heart jumped. She turned again. "Adrian." The sound came again, this time closer, softer, like it was brushing against her ear. "I'm here." Her knees weakened. "Where?" No reply. Only the rhythmic ticking of a clock, impossible, echoing faintly through the woods.
Tick, tick, tick.
She shone the flashlight around and gasped. A clock, an old grandfather clock, stood between the trees, half buried in moss and roots. Its glass was cracked, its pendulum still swinging. Evelyn stepped closer, mesmerized. How? She reached out to touch it, and the air shifted. The woods around her seemed to blur. The trees bent, the ground tilted, and suddenly, she was standing somewhere else. The air was still. The night sky shimmered with stars. Before her stretched the lake, calm, silver, and endless. She stumbled forward, disoriented. The flashlight had vanished from her hand. The only light now came from the moon and the stars reflected on the water's surface. And standing by the shore was a man. He turned slowly toward her. The moment his eyes met hers, her breath caught. It was him, Adrian. His face was exactly as she remembered in flashes, gentle eyes, soft smile, the faint scar by his temple. He looked alive, but faintly translucent, like moonlight passing through fog. "Evelyn," he said, his voice trembling. "You came." Her throat tightened. "Adrian, is it really you?" He nodded, stepping closer, though his feet left no marks on the wet earth. "I've been waiting. Every night. Hoping you'd remember." Tears filled her eyes. "I thought I was going mad," she whispered. "I kept hearing your voice. Seeing things. I thought it was my mind, my broken memory playing tricks on me." He smiled sadly. "It wasn't a trick. You've been trying to find me, even when you forgot who I was. The bond between us, it never truly broke." She took a shaky step closer. "Why can't I remember everything? Why did it all disappear?" Adrian's gaze dropped. "Because the night you lost me, you tried to forget." A cold wind brushed past her. "What do you mean?" "The accident," he said softly. "We were driving back from the lake. You saw something in the road. Something you said was standing there, though I couldn't see it. You swerved. The car hit the water." Evelyn's heart began to pound. Bits of memory flashed. Rain, headlights, a scream, and then darkness. "I tried to get to you," he said. "But I couldn't. When they pulled you out, you were barely breathing." Her lips trembled. "You didn't make it." He nodded once, pain flickering across his face. "You refused to believe I was gone. Your mind fractured to protect you. You erased me to survive the pain." She pressed her hands to her face. "No, I didn't mean to forget you." Adrian stepped closer, reaching out as if to touch her cheek, but his hand stopped just short, shimmering. "I know. That's why I stayed. The silence of the night became my world. I've been calling to you through the hours when the world sleeps, hoping you'd hear." Her tears spilled freely now. "Adrian, I want to remember everything. I want to see our life again." He smiled faintly, eyes glimmering like the stars above them. "Then you must look within the silence. That's where the truth waits." The lake rippled, reflecting the stars like glass. Evelyn stared at it, heart trembling. "What truth?" "The truth about what you saw that night," he said quietly. "The thing in the road, the shadow that made you turn. It wasn't real. It was part of your fear, but something else was." She frowned, confused. "Something else?" Adrian nodded. "You felt it in the house, haven't you? The voice that isn't mine. The one that whispers to you when you write." Her breath caught. "Yes, I thought it was you." His eyes darkened. It wasn't. The wind stirred again, carrying faint whispers across the lake. The water rippled, and for a moment, Evelyn saw shapes moving beneath its surface, dark, shifting forms. "What is it?" she whispered. "The shadow that feeds on memory," he said. "It came to you that night. It wanted your grief, your loneliness. When you forgot me, it hid inside the silence. It speaks to you so you'll keep listening, so you'll never move on." She took a step back, shivering. "Then how do I stop it?" He looked at her, sorrowful but determined. "You have to remember everything, Evelyn. All of it. Even the pain. Only then will it lose its hold." She closed her eyes. The air seemed to hum around her. Images began to flood her mind. Adrian laughing in the sunlight, reading her manuscripts, painting by the window. Their wedding, the housewarming, their late-night talks by the fire. And then the rain, the headlights, the crash. Adrian's hand slipping from hers. The cold water rising. The silence that followed. Her heart ached so fiercely she thought it might break. But through the pain, something inside her began to clear. The fog lifted, and the world around her glowed brighter. When she opened her eyes again, Adrian stood closer, his form clearer, more solid. "You're remembering," he whispered. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I remember everything." He smiled, the same gentle, loving smile she had seen 1,000 times before. "Then I can finally rest." "No," she said, stepping forward. "Don't leave me again." He shook his head softly. "You won't lose me. I'll live in every story you write, every word you speak in the quiet hours of the night. That's where I'll be." The lake shimmered behind him, glowing with light. The air was warm now, peaceful. He reached out his hand once more. This time, she felt it, soft, real, filled with warmth. "Goodbye, my love," he whispered. "Goodbye," she said, her voice breaking. The light grew brighter, wrapping around him until he was gone. The lake stilled. The silence returned, but it was no longer empty. Evelyn stood there for a long time, the night calm around her. Then she turned and walked home beneath the stars, her heart full of both sorrow and peace. When she reached her house, dawn was breaking. The first light of morning touched the windows. She went to her desk, opened her notebook, and began to write. In the silent hours of the night, I remembered him. I remembered love, loss, and the voice that waited across the water. Some memories hurt, but they are what make us human. They are what keep the night from swallowing the stars. She smiled through her tears and closed the notebook gently. Outside, the world was waking, and in the faint whisper of the wind, she thought she heard his voice once more. Soft, distant, and full of love. "I'm proud of you, Evelyn." The day that followed was the first in a long time that felt real to Evelyn. The sunlight spilling across her floor didn't feel cold or distant anymore. It felt alive. She could breathe again, even though her heart still carried a quiet ache. She had finally remembered Adrian, his face, his laughter, his love, and with that came a bittersweet peace. But beneath it, in the far corners of her mind, a small unease still lingered. The words Adrian had spoken by the lake echoed like a fading song. "The voice that isn't mine, it hides in the silence." Even as she tried to move on, the thought wouldn't leave her. The next few days passed quietly. Evelyn spent her mornings writing again, her afternoons walking through the fields, and her evenings sitting on the porch, watching the sky change colors. People in town had noticed she looked different, calmer, more awake. Even Mr. Hanley at the grocery store smiled and said, "It's good to see you smiling again, Miss Hart." She smiled back, though the smile carried a shadow. Because at night, when the world fell silent, she still heard it. The whisper. It was softer now, like a breath beneath the wind. Sometimes it said her name. Sometimes it repeated words she had written that day, as though mocking her thoughts. At first, she ignored it. But as the nights went on, it grew bolder. "Evelyn, don't forget me. Come back to the lake." Each time she tried to sleep, it returned, never angry, never loud, just patient and cold. And worse, the clocks had begun to tick again. All of them. Even the old broken one in her study, which hadn't worked since before the accident. One evening, she found herself standing in front of it. The clock's pendulum swung gently, though no one had touched it. The ticking was deep, slow, almost like a heartbeat. She stared at it, frozen. "You shouldn't be working," she whispered.
Tick, tick, tick.
Then, faintly, she heard it, a sound between the ticks like a breath caught between seconds. A whisper. "He isn't gone, Evelyn." Her pulse quickened. "Who's there?" "He's waiting for you." Her throat tightened. "Adrian."
No.
The word came like a hiss, soft but sharp. She stumbled back, clutching the wall for balance. "You can bring him back," the voice said. "You just have to remember one more thing." Evelyn backed away, shaking her head.
No.
"You're not real. You're the thing he warned me about." But the voice didn't stop. It came from all around now, from the walls, the floor, the air itself. "He doesn't have to be gone forever. The silence can give him back to you. You just need to open the door. What door? She cried. The clock began to tick faster, louder. The hands spun wildly, blurring into a circle of light. Then the glass cracked, spiderweb lines racing across its surface. Behind it, faintly glowing, she saw something, like an outline of a doorway pulsing in the shadows. She stared at it, trembling. Every instinct told her to run, but another part of her, the part still aching for Adrian, pulled her closer. She could almost hear his voice again, soft and distant. Evelyn. Her hand hovered over the glass. If I open it, she whispered, will I see him again? The whisper answered, smooth and cold.
Yes.
You'll be together. Just reach inside. Her fingers trembled as she touched the cracked surface. The glass was icy, burning her skin. The air around her thickened, humming with invisible energy. And then, for a heartbeat, she saw it. Adrian's face, just beyond the glass. His eyes were filled with sorrow. His lips moved soundlessly, forming a single word.
No.
Evelyn gasped and yanked her hand back. The light behind the clock flickered violently. The whisper turned angry now, no longer calm. You promised, it hissed. You wanted him back. The walls began to shake. The air grew heavy and dark. The house groaned, as though it were alive. Evelyn stumbled back, clutching the notebook on her desk like a weapon. You're not him. You're the shadow. The whisper turned into a low growl, echoing through every corner of the room. You remembered him. That's how I found you. You opened the door the moment you remembered. The clock struck 3, its chime hollow and warped. The glass shattered completely, and from within the clock, something black and shapeless began to pour out, like smoke, but thicker, colder. It slithered across the floor, rising slowly, forming the vague shape of a human silhouette. 2 pale eyes opened in the darkness. Evelyn stumbled backward, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The shadow's voice was no longer a whisper, it was everywhere at once, vibrating through her chest. You belong to the silence now, Evelyn. You always have. She shook her head furiously.
No.
I belong to my memories. To him. He's gone, the shadow said. But I can give him back. One life for another. Let go of your fear. Let go of the dawn. Her hands tightened around the notebook, the one filled with Adrian's letters, her words, and the fragments of her love. She realized then what she had to do. No, she whispered. You can't have my silence. Or my night. Or my love. The shadow's form rippled, furious. You think your words can stop me? Evelyn looked down at her notebook, the pages trembling in her hands. No, she said softly. But our words can. She opened the notebook and began to read aloud. Her voice shook at first, but with each word, it grew stronger. In the silent hours of the night, the past calls, but the living must answer. Love is not a chain, nor a shadow. It is the light that remembers. The air crackled. The shadow screamed, twisting violently. The walls of the house shook, but Evelyn kept reading, her voice rising above the chaos. You have no power over what is remembered with love. The shadow lunged toward her, but as it did, a sudden brilliance filled the room. Light burst from the notebook, spilling like dawn through the cracks in the darkness. The shadow howled, thrashing, shrinking under the light. Adrian, she cried. Help me. And from within the light, a voice answered. I'm here. The room filled with warmth. The air hummed with something beautiful and familiar. She saw Adrian's silhouette appear again, bright, steady, whole. He reached for her, his eyes soft. You did it, he said. You remembered what was real. The shadow screamed one final time and vanished, torn apart by the light. The ticking of the clocks stopped. The silence that followed was deep, but peaceful. Evelyn fell to her knees, breathing hard. The notebook lay open before her, glowing faintly, its pages unburned. Adrian knelt beside her, his touch gentle. It's over now, he said. The silence has no power here anymore. Tears streamed down her face. Don't leave me again. He smiled, brushing her cheek softly. You'll never be alone again. I'm a part of you now, your memory, your words, your heart. Whenever you write, I'll be there. She nodded slowly, holding onto his image as the light began to fade. I'll keep writing, she whispered. I promise. I know, he said, smiling. That's why I loved you. And with that, he was gone. Evelyn stayed there for a long time, the morning light creeping through the windows. The house was still now, no whispers, no ticking, no shadows. Only peace. She looked at her notebook again and found new words written on the last page. They weren't hers. Love remembers. Silence forgets. H. She smiled softly through her tears and whispered, Good night, Adrian. The days that followed were filled with a strange, peaceful quiet. The silence that once frightened Evelyn now felt gentle, like an old friend. The shadows no longer whispered. The clocks no longer ticked without reason. And though the house was still as lonely as ever, it no longer felt haunted. It felt alive. Each morning, she wrote by the window. She wrote about love, about grief, about memory. But most of all, she wrote about Adrian. Not as a ghost or a dream, but as someone who had truly lived. And with every word she wrote, she felt him near, his warmth in the sunlight, his laughter in the wind, his presence in every quiet corner of her heart. A month passed before she dared return to the lake. The trees had begun to turn gold with early autumn, their leaves whispering softly as she walked. The air was crisp and full of memory. The water shimmered under the morning light, calm and endless. She stood at the shore for a long time listening. Adrian, she said quietly, I kept my promise. I kept writing. A soft breeze brushed her hair, and for a moment, she felt a warmth on her shoulder, like a hand resting there. She smiled, knowing. She knelt down and placed a small notebook beside the water. The cover was bound in deep blue, the same color as the ribbon that had once tied his letters together. On the first page she had written, For Adrian, in the silent hours of the night, I found you again, and in remembering you, I found myself. She watched as the wind turned the pages gently, then lifted her gaze to the horizon. Goodbye, my love, she whispered. Thank you for waiting. The breeze carried her words across the surface of the lake, and though no one else would have heard it, Evelyn thought she caught the faintest echo in return, soft, loving, eternal. Always. That night, back home, Evelyn lit a candle and sat at her desk once more. Outside, the moon hung full and bright. The world was quiet again, yet it was no longer the heavy silence of loss. It was the peace of understanding. She began a new story. The first line flowed easily, as though the words had been waiting for her. There are two kinds of silence. The silence that hides pain, and the silence that holds love. Only one can save you. Her pen moved steadily, carrying her through the night. Hours passed, but she didn't feel tired. When she finally stopped, the candle had burned low. She looked up, half expecting to see Adrian by the window, sketching or reading. The chair beside it was empty, but she smiled anyway. He didn't need to be there. He already was, in every word she'd written. As dawn crept in, Evelyn stepped outside onto the porch. The world was painted in silver and gold, the sky soft and wide. Birds sang from the trees, their voices gentle and new. For the first time in years, she felt light. Not because she had forgotten, but because she had remembered everything. The pain, the love, the silence, the voice. All of it was part of her now. Nothing was lost anymore. She closed her eyes and let the morning wind move through her hair. And in that peaceful silence, she spoke softly, almost to herself. In the end, the night never took me. It only taught me how to listen. Because even in silence, love remembers. That evening, as the stars appeared one by one, Evelyn's house glowed with soft light. Her typewriter rested beside her desk now, a symbol of the life she had reclaimed. The clocks all ticked in harmony, marking the rhythm of time as it should be. She poured herself a cup of tea, opened her notebook again, and began the final page of her story. The night was never my enemy. It was a mirror, showing me what I had forgotten. And when I learned to face it, I found the one thing I thought I had lost forever: the sound of my own heart. She paused, smiling through quiet tears, and added the final line: "The silent hours of the night are no longer lonely." Outside, the moon hung high above her home, gentle and watchful. And if one listened carefully, very carefully, they might have heard it too, a whisper in the wind, faint but full of warmth. "Good night, Evelyn." She looked up, smiled softly, and whispered back, "Good night, Adrian." The candle flickered once, then steadied, its flame glowing strong against the dark. And in that moment, as the night embraced the world in silence, Evelyn Hart was no longer afraid. She had remembered everything. She had found her way home,